Welcome to the House by Vsor podcast. I'm your host, William, and join me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Rob Zombie's 3 from Hell. And I know leading up to this, we went to the Days of the Dead convention in Louisville back in September. And Bill Moseley was there and Clint Howard, and they had a panel about it. And I know some of those videos had done pretty well and gotten some views and comments and things on it.
I mean, because it's Rob Zombie. Devil's Reject, or Devil's Reject's adjacent,
And then I know a lot of people were in the comments for that, seeming like they were excited for this movie to come out and were looking forward to it. And people would say, "What about my ticket?" and all this type of stuff. So we know that there was interest in it. They had a 3-day theatrical run, and then I think on the 15th, the day it came out, had another day in theaters. So I think it made a little under $2 million in theaters.
on a $3 million budget.
Yeah, right. Which, I mean, part of the logic is if it made $2 million, it could have, if it stayed in theaters longer, it could have made more. But then the flip side of that is how much of that is just everybody that wanted to see it saw it in the special screenings.
Yeah, those Fathom things seem like they're a successful strategy for movies of this level. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot of people say, hey, do an event thing where it's not like a full rollout. They're not losing money on rolling it out and the cost of rolling these films out. And it makes a lot of buzz towards it because it is a specific time you can see it and that's it.
Yeah, because a lot of theaters probably wouldn't want to have this movie taking up a screen when it can instead be devoted to whatever is out now that's making money.
Yeah. And I don't see this being a movie that had general mass appeal because to be fair, outside of Halloween, none of his other two movies have generated a profit. So.
Well, I mean, so they've made money. So House of a Thousand Corpses was one where they made the movie and said, "Oh my God, what did you make? We weren't paying attention to what you did."
Yeah.
Because that was at Universal. They even had him make a House of a Thousand Corpses thing for their haunted house.
Yeah, now they're celebrating it.
And then...
So, I mean, they think it's big enough to...
Yeah, House of a Thousand Corpses
but then
is fine enough.
Executives saw the movie and are like, oh no, we thought this was going to be like Darkness Falls or something, that movie from the 90s, like the PG-13 one. And they're like, we can't release this. And then it ended up going to, was it Lionsgate, I think? Because it rotated around for a while. It eventually got released on video and stuff like that.
And you think where the horror films were in that era, I mean, how kind of, I don't know, they were, a lot of them were some of them were very tame and kind of started getting to rut, like post-Scream. You know what I mean? Like, House of a Thousand Corpses was
off the rails,
around 2000, okay, at least this is something that's
I think it was I think it was made and ready in 2000. I have to look at this back, so I don't really remember. But around 2001, it was done and had been been able to been screened. But I think it took till 2003 till it hit the video market, just because of the stuff around ownership of it. But
I'm not saying there's some great horror films from that era, but
yeah, I mean, but you had the
it was a different time.
The Scream influenced mystery murder slashers. It kind of died down by that point, by the 2000, 2001, and that was that was around the time that The Grudge and everything started coming out with those the Japanese remakes. So it's kind of in a transitionary period from the teen slasher boom in the 90s to the kind of Japanese horror remakes pre-Saw, or around the era when Saw was starting to come out. So kind of a different era. Devil's Rejects is one that
I think it's where he really found out what his niche was. I think that's one where he felt like a fully developed filmmaker.
Yeah.
It was well-rounded.
Because House of a Thousand Corpses, so when we did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 for this podcast, I hadn't watched that in a very long time, and I was like, oh man, he wholesale lifted this entire movie for House of a Thousand Corpses. It was so much his complete aesthetic.
Yeah.
I mean, with the colored lighting, the underground lair, the kind of goofy stuff with detectives or police officers, and so just all this stuff. I was like, oh man, he really just wholesale lifted that for his aesthetic, which a lot of filmmakers do early on. They just kind of go after what influenced them. But then Devil's Rejects is the one where it felt like this is its own thing. This is his niche, is kind of making something.
His evolution of that genre and type of film, it was very much those 70s types of low budget.
Right, you watch it, okay, this all made sense. Because House of a Thousand Corpses, was kind of, I don't want to say completely unhinged, but it was very left field considering what came out. It was different enough that it was interesting.
Or even if it wasn't like, you know, the like, you know, a masterpiece or perfect in every regard, at least it was different enough that got attention
and
for
like
it.
the mythos of like Dr. Satan or Mr. Satan, whatever his name was in that, was interesting enough, and it was weird enough. Like, okay, I'll enjoy it. It's maybe not necessarily my thing 100%, but I can appreciate for what it is, and it's so... feels like a music video because there's so many different cuts. You have the weird scenes in the house,
the insert scenes, like the home video footage.
And like, but that worked, and it kept it moving fast. Then Devil's Rejects is like, it just to me felt more like a seasoned director who had a vision and he made what he was wanting to make.
Yeah, it felt like
this plot, which was essentially the same as this movie. To be honest, they're not a whole lot different. And then then you get to this one, and it's just like I don't understand. Like, because you remade the second movie, but worse.
Well, you know, for him, I'm almost surprised just because he, like, loves, I mean, he's a big film fan. Like, he talks, you know, loves classical horror films.
Yeah.
He talks, when you hear him talk about horror films, it has a wider breadth. It's not just like he's, like, only talking about, oh, I love exploitation from the 70s. Yeah. You know, he loves classical horror from what I remember. And so I would have been interested to see him actually try some different type of subgenres of horror, almost like Guillermo del Toro, you know, like with like Crimson Peak or something. Like to see Rob Zombie do like almost like a, you know, House on Haunted Hill type, his version of that.
Well, I think what happened was, so he had done, you know, House of a Thousand Corpses, took forever to come out. Once it finally came out, it did well in like the video market and got buzz around. And then he made The Devil's Rejects, which, while a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses in ways, was a completely different beast and different type of film. And then that landed him the Halloween series. So he did Halloween 1 and 2. And then he did Lords of Salem. And that was kind of his departure. Like, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to just, you know, stay in the same wheelhouse of kind of grisly slasher 70s throwback stuff. I mean, it was still a throwback to the 70s and 60s.
That's the one I have not seen.
Which I have seen it, but I just felt like it wasn't my groove. It wasn't my jam. At least it was different than what he had done. I mean, stylistically and a lot of stuff, it wasn't a ton different, just a different type of story. It wasn't just greasy, grimy rednecks killing people. But then it didn't do well at the box office. So then I think at that point he was just kind of like, ugh. And then with 31 and 3 from Hell, just I'm going to go back to my greatest hits. That's what the people want. Which, I mean, I don't know if that part of that's being a musician, because you realize, you know, with musicians, Rob Zombie was in White Zombie. And then when he went in solo, everyone said, oh, you suck. White Zombie was good. But then there's people now that have been following long enough. They're like, well, I don't like any of your new stuff. I like your old stuff, like Dracula. That's everything else sucks. So I think maybe it's the mentality of, well, let's just go back to what they want. So let's just go back and play the greatest hits.
That's, I think, the entire issue of this movie is because, like, let's just get into it a little bit. You know, they all died seemingly at the end.
Yeah, are we going to do full spoilers?
Yeah, because I don't know.
So we'll do full spoilers, because here's the thing. So the only things that are even considered spoilers at this point are common knowledge, like the fact that Sid Haig did not have a huge role in this film due to his declining health at the time. So, you know, we can, you know, discuss full spoilers throughout. So if you haven't seen the movie at all, we will discuss plot points throughout the movie. But I mean, here's the thing, though. If you've seen his...
Again, I say this about a lot of movies, but this... So you guys, to start off, you guys were way lower on it than I was.
Yeah, I mean, when I got done watching it...
let's give our numbers right now so we know where people are at.
So just go ahead and give our
number score now.
Oh, 0 out of 10. It was easily the worst week I've watched.
So stay tuned to hear why you thought that.
This was worse than the Cabin Fever remake.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say that if I'm giving this a score out of 10, if I'm rating this objectively across all movies, so, you know, if I'm... Because sometimes we grade stuff on a curve a little bit.
I'm talking about your enjoyment level. Like when you was sitting there watching it, was you like, I wasted my time aside from the podcast, you know, or did you get were you at all wondering what was going to, like, where did you land?
If we weren't doing this to the podcast, I probably wouldn't have finished it.
Yeah.
Give like a, you know, 2 out of 10, 1 out of 10 or something. I mean, you know, like anything that is technically well made, you know, relatively speaking, is at least a 1, because you see so much stuff that's like low budget stuff where it's like there's no sound and the audio.
Or if you're just inherently against it, then you could give it a 0. If you're just like,
but I mean,
and so what would you guys give 31?
I have to go back to the episode and listen.
But in your mind, is this lower than that or higher than that?
This 31 was more enjoy. I don't want to watch either of them, but if you said, Derek, you gotta watch one of them, I would choose 31.
So I think that 31 was to me, at least this, you had Bill Moseley. Mm-hmm. 31 was just like, oh, it's a lot of Sherry Moon Zombie and a lot of stuff I don't care about, and even more stylistic choices that, because didn't that one have like the insert of like the footage and all that
video,
stuff? So that one just felt like Rob Zombie's gonna Rob Zombie, and then this one at least doesn't feel like it relies on all the same tricks as much. Although there are a ton of like wipe transitions and split screen, a lot of stuff that's very stylistic.
I think the reason why I'm gonna give it a 0 to 10, I don't care if there's like it's adequately shot. Yeah. That doesn't matter, because I look at it as a transition from a filmmaker from where you started, where you've been at. And all the other movies have generally been on a trajectory of up. I mean, Halloween movies, you can say they're not as great, but some people really like them. But then this one is like, you had an established world, you had it, and then you go back and you just, I don't even know what this was. Like, they tried to, again, sell them as the heroes of this franchise, which, like, I did that again.
So I'd probably actually give this maybe like a 6. Like, I didn't love it, but when it started out, the film starts out, I'm like, okay, it's kind of taking a while to get started. They're having to really explain things away. But by like the last, like I was kind of watching it and working at the same time, and I was going to stop and take a break, but there was probably like 30 minutes left, and I actually wanted to see what was going to happen. Well, so that says a lot for me as a personal viewer. Yeah. I was actually like, I want to see what happens, because, and it partially is, since watching Devil's Rejects, in theaters years ago. Like, I've seen Bill Moseley at several horror cons. I've listened to him talk a lot from panels, sitting in the ones of Days of the Dead, multiple ones there. So a big part of it is, like, I've become a fan of Bill Moseley as the person.
He is so good in this.
And I've always liked Rob Zombie, and Sherry Moon Zombie, she seems legit and cool. I know some people aren't fans of her acting or whatever.
It was very annoying in this.
But for me, I was more watching this film as just like, hey, these people that I like, I just want to see what they're doing. And it seems like they had a good time making this film. Like, they seemed like they had fun with their performances. So basically it was just that. So, and also I feel like it was slightly different. This was a looser narrative, and it did feel like a little bit like a hangout movie where this was an excuse to get together with his friends, kind of revisit this stuff for better or for worse. But it was a chance to make something in with his friends and kind of, I don't know, almost not take it as seriously. So I was almost okay with that. Again, I like Bill Moseley. I was curious to see him return to that role.
He was fine. Is this kind of those things?
I feel like I don't understand why a bigger production or something hasn't been like, he's legitimately funny and entertaining. Let's get him in something with some decent material. Because whenever they get around to making the eventual movie about Trump, he can be Ted Nugent or something. He'd be perfect for that.
But he is very funny, and he is quippy, and he is enjoyable to watch on the screen. But if everything else is just a big, gigantic, festering turd, it doesn't really matter.
So the thing I would say that they did is, so you mentioned this. So this movie, when you sit down and think about it, it's like, okay. So the first part of the movie is the characters all escaping from where they're at.
Let's just talk about this real quick. Because the scene, it's just like a music video or music's like a song. You get like what they say, like 5 or 10 seconds, your brain knows. I think one of the first lines of dialogue is they reference the end of Devil's Rejects, and they say they all have a 1,000,000 to 1 chance of survival. I was done at that point. Like, this is the dumbest line I've ever heard.
They shouldn't even have said that.
It was so stupid. The only film footage I've ever seen that's quite as dumb as that is Spider-Man 3, when they're doing the newscast with the big fight at the end.
Yeah.
And it's like, that to me just pulled me out immediately.
The only thing, it was not... I was not a fan of that either, and I specifically remember that. But my mind was like, oh, is he trying to draw parallels to, like, hey, there was some sort of mystical thing, like it really was like forces of hell that allowed them to survive. But they don't lean on that. No. They could have changed genres. They could have made this supernatural or something and really made it something different. Yeah. I'm not saying I wanted that necessarily, but that line almost felt like it felt wrong unless it was feeding into something else, and it never really fed anything else. Well, it was just saying, like, hey, we're making another movie and they're back. You know what I mean? Like, it was an excuse
So the end of Devil's Rejects, Devil's Rejects played them up as kind of folk heroes, like outsiders, because a lot of the filmography of Rob Zombie or a lot of other filmmakers are, very much like, oh, the people we care about are the outsiders, the outcasts. That's who you identify with. So that's why these characters are protagonists and you identify with them. And that's a lot of what his movies do. But in the last movie, you identify. I think about the end of that movie, a lot of people sided with them versus Sheriff Wydell and his group. But at the end of the day, they did kill a bunch of people, so they deserved to die. And then this movie, they survive. So it just kind of takes away any like resonance from the prior film.
Yeah.
The prior film being like, yeah, they're these kind of outcasts that are entertaining and they made their own family and all this stuff. But then they ultimately died because they killed a bunch of people.
And there's a shift. That film was, I think, existed in that film world. I think this film exists in the world of basically making it for the fans like, hey, they just want to see these people back. And
they turned into Jason or Michael Myers.
Yes, they are a fan of these characters in this world, not somebody to actually you would celebrate in the real world. So they're just like, I think he was just confident in saying, hey, people just want these guys back. This is kind of a different feel, so we're just going to spend some time with them and bring them back. Yeah, it did deflate the seriousness, quote unquote seriousness or weight of it. You know what I mean? Feeling like something that you're actually like invested in. Because it did all feel like just this like little play they were putting on. But again, for me, I was fine with that because it felt a little bit different that way.
I just think my issue with it was like talking about Devil's Rejects is you had the sheriff who, even though he was the hero, was portrayed as a villain, so you had a good protagonist or antagonist. Sorry, you don't have that in this one. There's nothing on this one. There's really nothing that moves the story.
What I was going to say was
not any character you're afraid of.
So in both movies, you have all the characters kind of separated out, getting back together. And in the course of doing that, two of the characters go and hold people hostage, which involves a naked woman running, like being attacked.
Yeah.
And then they go on a road trip to somewhere they think is safe, but the establishment owner rats them out, and they get into a big fight scene at the end.
Yeah.
So it's almost the exact same plot, but without like a protagonist you follow from the beginning and actually getting any insight to or care about.
It has motivation. Because the motivation's the same, because they killed Danny Trejo.
Yeah, but the Danny Trejo stuff, I was like, they couldn't afford Danny Trejo for more than a day of shooting. Like, I'm not sure why even have him. I mean, it's like a throwaway thing to have him in there, and he doesn't recognize these mass murderers that he
I guess there's a direct connection to it, and it links those two films more strongly.
It just felt like it was...
And it made sense that, the whole going to Mexico, which was a different setting, I
think he just sat there and thought, like, oh, man, the Fireflies versus Luchadors, awesome, and then just wrote something.
Yeah. He did the haunted world of El Super Beasto. Like, he has been invested in luchadors to some degree.
The thing is, you basically just see, Danny Trejo's character dies by getting shot in the beginning of the movie in a very quick scene when Otis escapes. And then the shop or the establishment owner calls a Mexican, I guess, cartel member or crime boss and says,
which is Danny Trejo's brother or somehow connected to Danny Trejo.
It's like, oh yeah, we got people here that killed whatever Danny Trejo's character was. So then they show up armed with assault rifles, they're wearing luchador masks, and then get dispatched very easily by the now superhero-like or James Bond-like Fireflies. I mean, in the last movie, Danny Trejo and Diamond Dallas Page beat the shit out of the other people. So in this one, they take on quadruple the amount of people with firearms. Like, I know they were armed, but it just seemed like they're John Rambo.
Again, I think there's a shift in the seriousness of it, or, you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, what do we... Even the ending of this film was like, hey, what do you want to actually happen? Oh, this is what you want to happen in this film. You know what I mean? Like, as if you're looking at fans of it, fans of, maybe there are plenty of ones that always want to see Jason get killed, but, plenty of people are probably rooting, like, for some, like, hey, I want to see Jason escape,
Yeah, but I guess, though, at least with Jason, like, there was memorable murders and... Like, at the end of the day, like, they never played Jason as a good guy. They never played him as a likable
person. They did. They played him as a victim.
Yeah. Well, they never had scenes of Jason where they tried to make you, like, oh, yeah, go Jason. Like, that was a part of it, but it was never, like, the thing they set out to do.
That's why I think Devil's Rejects was so good, because it walked that tightrope. Yeah. And I think it pulled it off for me as far as, like, hey... for some weird reason you are invested in these characters, even though they are bad. Where this film, it just wants you to accept that you're on their side without doing any of that work, because it is a sequel.
Well, like I mentioned, so I think that the movie suffered big time from not having, Sid Haig throughout, because he was a big driving force in the chemistry of that group in the prior films. Granted, you can't blame Rob Zombie that somebody was, under the weather and couldn't physically do the role. But at the same time...
Did you hear how he had to rewrite it, like, within like days.
Yeah, but then I've also seen stuff on Instagram and stuff where Sid Haig's like account, like his wife runs, has kind of been upset with Rob Zombie because him portraying it as like, oh, this is Sid Haig's last film and this is the last time he'd be on film and blah blah blah. But he apparently shot like a role after that and has movies coming out after that. So I think the point that she was kind of upset was it seemed like he was using his death to sell the movie. And I have no insight to that whatsoever. I'm just relaying what I've seen on. I think Blade Discussing had an article
3 minutes
about
of screen time in it, so it wasn't. Yeah.
But the point was, so it suffered from not having him in it because he was a big driving force in the charisma and the group. So you can't necessarily blame the movie for lacking that. But it's just in the prior film, it's like these are bad people because it even starts out with Otis with like dead cheerleaders or whatever that he had implied like raped and murdered. So you knew that they were bad. But they were so entertaining, you enjoyed watching what was happening. And then you set up an antagonist that, yeah, they've got the right idea. I don't really care what they do to them once they catch them because they've done so much terrible stuff. But it positions them as the antagonist. So he has like this interesting play of, because a lot of movies and shows do that. They take a person who's kind of a bad person and then sets up a good antagonist. And then you're interested to see the clash and set it up.
It's like Dexter, or any kind of show where you have your anti-hero,
it's just like seeing this movie, they threw that completely away and was like, we're just going to follow the antics of these guys and you want them to win in every situation.
Again, it's just like, it seems like it's made for the fans. As people say, this actually does seem like it was specifically made for people who are big fans of Devil's Rejects, those specific characters. But IMDb, it's getting trashed horribly on reviews. You know what I mean? I've seen plenty of ones that were like 1 out of 10. This is a terrible movie.
I was thinking too, like, he
may have misread why people like that movie.
I think he misread it, and I think there's a swing and a miss, because if you made... It's like doing a movie where you make a Friday 13th that you want for the fans, but then you take everything out of it that the fans liked, because...
Or you don't understand why they liked it.
Yeah, you don't really
understand. But there are plenty of big fans of this film. I've seen some that have really loved it, but there's also big fans of Rejects that have said, hey, this movie is terrible.
So I think that part of it is the absence of a character like Sheriff Wydell, played by William Forsythe in the prior film.
That hurts.
Because it's like, so recently I watched...
If you're looking for that type of movie, that hurts.
So like,
and I was fine with it being a different type of movie, actually.
But he made the same movie.
Yeah, he made the same...
I don't know. So I think a lot of... Even the first part, I was like, okay, Sherry Moon Zombie's in prison for a long time. And Baby was. And I was kind of like, I wanted her to get out. But I thought, oh, wait, I think he's actually making... He's like, how long is she in prison? Like 20 minutes, 25 minutes or something? Like,
it's long.
Because it's the whole beginning segment is them basically trying to get her out.
Well, it's him saying like, oh, I want to do a little women in prison.
Exactly.
It's just like, so the same thing I run into, and they're pretty polarizing filmmakers like Rob Zombie and Eli Roth. The fact that you know a lot about film doesn't then make you kind of offhandedly referencing it make something good.
Yeah, but I don't know if they're necessarily saying that. They're just doing what they want to do sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he ever claimed like, hey, I
think my problem is they just, you did the same movie twice. I know there's slight variances, but again, you have the escape.
Yeah.
And then instead of the Sheriff Wydell guy, you have the, I guess, their antagonist for most of the
leader of the luchador gangster.
No, it's not even that guy. It's the warden. But he's never set up properly.
That was a bit of twist, too, because I assumed they were going the same direction, and then they just ended up off and killing him. So I was like, oh, this film kind of... But then, it freed itself from that point, and you did not know where it was going.
But then after that point, I really feel like they're like, all right, guys, I ain't got shit. What do you got? What do you want to do? And they're we can go film here. I'm like, all right.
The thing with the warden, though, was it was almost the same as the Devil's Rejects, where they have like the whatever in banjo group, and they take a couple of the guys out to make them help them find weapons or whatever it was. So this is a very similar thing of somebody has to go out with one of the Fireflies and then come back and get outmatched.
They took enough of it and they just broke it down to things. And then he's like, how can I put this in a blender, the same ingredients into a blender, and now it's not,
So just like something I was thinking about earlier is, so recently, unfortunately, Robert Forster passed away. He was in Jackie Brown, a ton of movies. He had been on TV like on Breaking Bad and Twin Peaks: The Return, all this stuff. Like, if you'd had somebody like with his gravitas that was like the person that was going after the Fireflies and trying to catch them, then you have a compelling movie again, because you got a compelling, person that's going after them, and then that gives them more to play on. But when it's just kind of randomly this guy that's a gangster that we don't really know anything about in Mexico shows up with a bunch of guys wearing masks, they're literally faceless goons, and they just dispatch them super easily. then there's like really. Well, I mean, because here's the thing: if you had three people that, and two, there's the other thing of Sherry Moon Zombie for whatever reason gets the Native American headdress and the bow and arrow.
Yeah, I don't.
And I think that was just him thinking of some imagery that would be cool.
Which I'm sure some people will love that. They will dress up
like it. It's going to sell shirts.
Her versus luchador. Like I like I like the idea of having some strong imagery.
Well,
you know what I mean?
You have so 31 and
it
this.
Didn't seem like it was like intentionally like, hey, what's this cool new costume I'm getting? Like, you know what I mean? Like a superhero movie or something.
But like both 31 and 3 from Hell were set, over Halloween to some extent and did almost nothing with it. Because even in Mexico, they vaguely had like a very low budgeted set dressing budget for Day of the Dead type stuff.
Well, I guess my other problem too with this movie is like when it comes to Rob Zombie, he just loves killing women on screen. So I think more women probably died in this movie than lived through it. So there's none of the murder scenes of people were particularly well done. They were all pretty.
So, the only thing I'll give the movie is I thought 31 looked cheap.
I thought this looked cheap.
Well, let me finish that. My point was I thought the 31 looked cheap and it looked very narrowed down to specifically like we built these like 3 sets. We're going to use them to their maximum extent and just kind of plug the holes. It didn't
feel like a real place.
It felt like
a set.
This movie.
I thought this one felt more like a real place. 31 didn't.
This movie felt like it looked better. Like I think they're probably both. I think they're all shot like on decent like RE cameras and stuff. But this one like they had some film grain layers applied, so it had a look that wasn't too far off from the first Devil's Rejects. Because the first Devil's Rejects I think had like a $5 million budget.
I thought it was 7 for some reason.
Or whatever it was.
It was 7.
7. So you're talking about $7 million in 2005. If take inflation into account, is quite a bit more today. That'd be more like a $10 to $12 million budget or somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But there's the effect of equipment is a lot cheaper now with like these digital cameras are cheaper than shooting on film.
But they're saying actually when you're shooting a movie, it's not actually that much cheaper. The things I've seen from DPs talking about, like it's cheaper a little bit, but really they're like with storage and all that, they're like it's really at the end of the day, you're not saving a ton. It's not a world-changing amount when you're shooting a professional film.
I guess like this.
And I'm talking about this level.
Well, the point is like I
fireworks.
think a lot of that stuff it requires less equipment.
Yeah, but I don't know if they ran on less equipment.
Is there anything in this movie that you will remember about it at all? Like, is there anything that you sit there and think about this? Because like it was bad. I thought it was one of the worst things I've watched in a long time.
So so the thing that I'll remember, so like I said, full spoilers. So the thing that I'll remember is this movie let them live and get away and set it up for a sequel. And I'm like, this just completely negates anything you accomplished with the Devil's Rejects. And they are now essentially superheroes. And
I just don't like okay, look. Whoever the redneck dude they just like dug out of the sewers for this movie.
Oh, that's harsh.
No, Richard Brake was so annoying.
I could not. Fine.
And like Sherry Moon Zombie was like, we want you to be the most annoying person that you can possibly be on screen, and it's and that's what it sounded like the entire movie.
Yeah, I like that. I like that she's at least something.
This was like whatever you had taken that worked from the character before. You like take anything that works out of this charter. Okay, that's gone. The stupid bullshit's left. Just do that, but 10 times.
I feel like
oh my god.
So the thing I will say is having the
without Sid Haig, I think that screwed
having the female having the female character out of the group be the one that kind of goes insane. Is kind of reductive a little bit, and kind of the way that typically goes because the guys always stay calm and collected, and are Otis is still making quips and being the exact same person. So why did she break versus him not?
She was always a little bit like almost like a Harley Quinn. Like she almost seemed like she was always a little off to begin with. I think so. I felt like it was just an evolution of her character, almost of being 10 years. This character being 10 years in prison.
I think that.
And what was up with the shitty tattoos? Like they took the Jared Leto.
I don't know.
They took the Jared Leto book and like, look, this looks really stupid. So let's
build this or something.
But they all had them.
Yeah.
No, they basically just said we need to make it edgy. So they're in prison. So I got some jailhouse tattoos.
But tattoos don't make things edgy.
But that's, I don't know. Maybe it's just.
You write damage across your forehead.
Yeah. But that's like when you take.
Ha ha ha.
That's like. Well, I guess Rob Zombie's a 6-year-old white man. So I was about to say 6-year-old white men find tattoos edgy of any type. So I guess like just throw a cat eating a banana on her.
So one thing I thought was a little bit interesting is again, this was some form of character development. because it does. The characters don't change a whole lot throughout the film. You know, they almost go there with her saying, "Do you think it's all worth it?" But they do nothing with it. Whenever she's thinking about Sid Haig, you know, you wonder if like, oh, are they gonna like
be introspective?
Are they gonna save this town at the end, maybe, or you know what I mean? Do something like some sort of redemption. But
nope.
Her instead of making, you know, she talks about after she's out of jail, she's like, I'm bored, I want some action. Instead of it being anything sort of sexual, like it turned her into, I mean, as there are some serial killers where their sexual gratification is from, you know, torture or murder. Well, and so they kind of, you know, she's like, I need some action. And it was basically just her going to slaughter.
But they never even played into that. They dropped these little tidbits that could have had something to say.
No, nothing was ever minded enough to be that interesting. But for me, like I said, there was enough little things where it kept me going through the film.
But something I think is disingenuous, though, because thinking back about like Devil's Rejects and this movie. In Devil's Rejects, both Otis and Captain Spaulding sleep with women or have involvement with women. In this movie, the Foxy guy or whatever, Richard Brake's character and Otis, they both sleep with women. But Sherry Moon Zombie never has any involvement with anyone. And is that simply because she's Rob Zombie's wife and he doesn't write love scenes in with other people?
I'm telling you, I think it's because her sexual gratification comes from murder alone. Like, I think she's that far gone.
Like, I mean,
that was my thinking in the film.
If there was anything to the actual text of the movies to suggest that, because I mean, like reading.
Well, she specifically says, I need some action. Typically, when you say action, that's sexual, especially out of prison. And I was like, oh, this is her replacement for sexual activity. That was what I drew. That specific line of dialogue made me think that was specifically.
Yeah. But like, it does make sense. But again, it's something that they just kind of.
Well, I mean,
throw
like,
away.
It's just kind of, I don't know. Like, you don't really want to trash any groups of people or whatever. It's just like. Maybe it's just the things, because he doesn't go to conventions very often, does he?
Who?
Rob Zombie himself?
I mean, he's busy, I think. I mean,
like with the music and everything, he probably doesn't go.
Yeah, I mean, he's like touring on the music or working on his films. Or
I'm just wondering, like, if a lot of times the echo chamber of feedback you get is from very vocal minorities, so you think that the thing that everybody really loved about something is something that really only a small percentage of people actually were the big fans of?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he probably was talking to Bill Moseley over the years and stuff. Like, hey, you know, and Sid Haig, like, hey, you know, people... They're still talking about the, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that it's getting past the grapevine.
Well, it's one of those things, too, where, now here's the thing. So if somebody is a big fan of those prior films and this was really their jam, like, I could get how getting more of what you wanted would be satisfying. I just don't think that anybody can sit there and say, on, you know, objectively reviewing this is a film that stands on its own. It
felt more like an episode of TV for me, where it's like, hey, this is like a mediocre episode of TV. Like, if it's a show I like, and this is like an okay episode, like, okay, I'm fine, I watched it this week. Yeah, it wasn't like, didn't blow my doors off, but I like these characters enough, I've been with them. That's what it felt like to me, like an okay episode of TV.
If you don't want to watch this, but you want to watch essentially the same thing, I referenced this on a group chat we had earlier. There's an episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza buys a Time magazine. At the same time, there's like a serial killer or some type of convicted criminal that wants it because he's on the cover. Where George gets it over him and like taunts him. Then later on, he ends up on an airplane with him and they gets him in the bathroom. And that's how the episode ends. That is like 22 minutes and it's the same plot of this movie essentially. Go watch that.
If you're coming to it for plot, but again, I don't think this film doesn't worry about the plot. It's a different type of film because it does not worry about the plot. It's just like, hey, we want to spend time with the characters. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just, this is a different intent. And if you didn't like the characters and you don't want to see the actors really, then yeah, I can see why it's like...
Otis, and he's good. Like, I like Bill Moseley. He is fun to watch on screen. But like I said, man, just what they give him to work with.
Well, because there's like even a moment where he makes a comment about how Baby's kind of crazy now. That was kind of funny, like the way he's like, oh, she's kind of... But it's just like, I wish that he was given a chance, you know, like...
But he's not, and this is what we have.
I know, like,
you know
if Tarantino, if like you mentioned, like if Tarantino had, you know, had some role for him, that could cause him to blow up and be all over the place because you've seen him in people that...
Like, he's got the... I guess you look at other filmmakers...
Tarantino really helped the careers of... Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio, they were kind of nobodies until... I'm just joking.
Like, with M. Night Shyamalan is who I'm kind of compared to Rob Zombie because, like, he started off really hot, which Rob Zombie never... I don't think has had anywhere near success he's had, but, you know, the trajectories where they start off really hot, then they kind of got in the middle and it went down, And then, M. Night Shyamalan's had movies that brought him back up.
Yeah.
And Rob Zombie has seemed to kind of come up, kind of plateau, and then go down, and then go down.
Yeah.
So
I want to see him. I would like to see him evolve. Like I said, I wish he would just. I don't know if he is staying in this sort of aesthetic because this is just what he loves and he wants to keep doing these, or if he feels pigeonholed, just like many directors do, or even musicians and stuff. So it's like I would love to see him, but he's not at the point where, like M. Night Shyamalan, where he was making $150 million movies that were bombing, and he came back and made $5 million. Like, he's already below that as far as budget goes. Well, so it's like, where is he gonna go?
Because his biggest movies have been Halloween and Halloween 2.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem, and something that he wants to make the movies that he wants to make, so I understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do so you mentioned somebody making a House on Haunted Hill type film with Rob Zombie directing. If that was written by someone else, then I'm interested.
But I'm saying I would like to see him evolve. Like, have him, if he changed his style of writing, you know what I mean?
I don't know that it's in his wheelhouse to not write the characters that he writes.
It might not be, but we don't know. Sometimes people change drastically. It may not be. He may be who he is as a writer. People can change. You know what I mean?
I just think at this point, though, you've had 3 movies in the same universe, 2 movies in the same universe, and then you had 31, and you had Lords of Salem. I have not watched Lords of Salem, so I cannot speak on it. But the majority of his films all revolve around things in the same universe. So I don't know if that's... But then again, though, when you see the characters act the same in 3 different types of movies that are vastly different in what they cover, because like 31's still kind of similar to everything else, but it's like potentially you've done... Most of your movies have been the exact same. They've all been slasher-based. And then everybody acts the same way in all of them. And there's always like... Which is fine.
Well, a good comparison for him that I was thinking about it. So Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, or whatever it's called, came out this week. So I think that Rob Zombie and Kevin Smith have a similar trajectory of, they had some early films that got some acclaim, and they peaked early with because Kevin Smith, his most critically acclaimed film was Chasing Amy. I mean, and Clerks was highly regarded at the time too. So you had those early movies early on that kind of build your name, and then you go into bigger projects, and then 20 years later you keep making the same type of stuff. I don't know. I think actually Kevin Smith is kind of... I think from what I've read of the reviews, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot is very similar in comedy to the old movies, more coherent than the movie with the Frankenfurter Hitler Wiener things, whatever that was called, with the yoga hosers. But it just feels like Rob Zombie's is on this trajectory to not evolve and just keep making the same thing. But I just don't see at this point, based on because the way all these systems work, unfortunately, I don't see anybody saying, based on what you've made in your last 3 films and what the financial returns have been, we're going to give you the reins of something different than what you've already made and give you a budget to make it, feel substantial. I don't know that's going to happen.
Yeah,
M. Night Shyamalan, from making those big movies to being, having a couple flops, had to go and self-finance a found footage film through Blumhouse.
And is Rob Zombie, is he kind of past that point of wanting to evolve? You know what I mean? Is he just kind of like...
Or does he just want to you do the concert tours and make a movie every 10 years?
He has enough power to where this isn't his only career. This isn't his only career. This always seemed like a fun side thing he did, and then he blew up. Or the point I was trying to make earlier before I said evolve, is his aesthetic and the films he likes to make, is that... not in vogue anymore. I feel like around the mid-2000s, a lot of people wanted that. It was fresh enough, and now we have many years later of many Rob Zombie films, and it's kind of old hat now. So the younger audiences, Rob Zombie is not. He's an old man to them. You know what I mean? Those are old movies.
And just what's popular in horror has changed.
That's what I mean. Yeah, is he aesthetic so defined where it's like he...
I think what would make more sense for this movie, and this is kind of like just watching different movies, and sometimes you start with bigger budgets and you work down, which is what he's done in this case. And what would make more sense to me is you take that $2 million budget, whatever they got, you make a smaller, more intimate setting movie that maybe, but that's not him as a director, because that would make more sense to make a more intimate type movie where maybe there's a little more repercussions for things.
Rob Zombie's Saw.
Yeah, something like that. But really, I mean, it's something that you just like. You take those same characters, you put them in a smaller world, and it looks better.
I would have liked to have seen Bill Moseley and Sid Haig in a room together with their legs chained together and watch them act for an hour.
But that would be fun.
But I mean, I think that part of it too is...
All right, we're getting a little low on time since we've got to do our podcast.
Yeah,
just
so...
to remind you guys.
But I think the other thing that happened is in the mid-2000s, you had the explosion. So you had The Devil's Rejects, and then you had Grindhouse from Tarantino and Rodriguez. You had the explosion of filmmakers thinking everyone wanted faux exploitation Grindhouse movies, which audiences really didn't want, because even
mass audiences did not.
Grindhouse didn't make much money. Devil's Rejects, even though a success, only made like $15 million.
And to be fair, there's a lot of stories about Weinstein sabotaging Grindhouse. Have you read any of that stuff?
Yeah, because like Rose McGowan was in it.
Yeah, Rose McGowan stuff and Robert Rodriguez, and he ended up just torpedoing that, supposedly.
But like, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people thought that that's what everyone wanted. Yeah. So after those films, you had a glut of independent movies when technology got better, shot on like red cameras and stuff. So stuff that actually looked legit was made in that Grindhouse style. And people got their fill of that 10 years ago.
Yes, I think there was definitely demand for it. People were going crazy for it, and I think a lot of films made some money on it.
Independent filmmakers were going crazy to make it.
That's what I mean. That
audiences weren't going crazy to buy it.
I think the independent audiences were giving those films money. Enough money to get a return on it. That's why they kept going for a little while.
But the point is like...
But that's over with.
Yeah, I think that aesthetic is kind of done. People are into different things now, which is why his movies have gotten smaller and smaller. So if he wants to make another movie, I think he has to go even lower budgeted, which I'm not sure how possible that is. But
all right, any other words on it?
Nothing positive.
Is it your worst horror film of the year? Worst film of the year?
It is probably, it's for sure the bottom of the list. I haven't seen anything that bad in a long time. So yeah, it's
I mean, I've seen some... I've watched some independent stuff on Amazon, so it's definitely not the worst.
They have less money. They don't have resources.
But it doesn't matter. I don't think less money.
The average person, when they're reviewing the stuff that we've made, like these short films for...
I don't grade on those. I mean, I guess sometimes I kind of do. It just depends.
If you're a filmmaker, you grade on a curve sometimes, but the average audience doesn't care what the resources were.
I think it's very unfair to grade Rob Zombie on the same scale, like who has made multiple motion pictures with studio backing and people who seem to know what they're doing, as opposed to like some people that went and got $10,000 and this is their first crack at something.
And two, you specifically said you were grading on his career. Like I specifically just graded as this film because I know it's a different era. This is a different budget. Like I'm just like, okay, what did they make now? Was I entertained enough? And I'm like, yeah, actually I was. And like I would probably put it on again one day. Just out of curiosity, like I'm not upset that I didn't buy it because I just rented it for this. I'm not upset that I didn't go ahead and just buy it or anything because I'm not watching it anytime soon. But I will want to revisit this one day.
I think there is a reason too the higher it's like Bloody Disgusting and all of your movie review sites that aren't focused on horror gave it pretty low reviews.
RogerEbert.com gave it what?
Oh, they gave it a
3.5 out of 4 or something.
But then, like, the AV Club gave it a D. So F is so bad it's probably worth watching, but a D is just ignore it. So I think there's a reason they're getting kind of very mediocre to negative reviews from the larger outlets, and it's the horror-focused, smaller, independent sites that are being more positive.
Bloody Disgusting.
I'm saying they're a big site. They're a big site.
Did they give it 1 or 2 out of 5?
It was pretty bad.
And they got a bit of blowback for it too, but. But here's the thing. If you like the movie, that's great. I'm just saying, for me, it gave me absolutely nothing. I was like I was wanting to watch that Breaking Bad El Camino that was on Netflix. I'm like, why am I watching this versus that?
Well, here's the thing. This was like a chore. It was like I had to force myself to watch it, and you just get through it. And to me, there was like so many eye-rolling moments where it's just like, if I could just shit my pants instead and go clean myself up, I'd probably enjoy myself more than watching.
See, I was coming in, like, I just recently went to that Bill Moseley panel. You know what I mean? I sit there for like an hour listening to them talk about different things, the movie, talk about filmmaking. Like, I was more invested in them. And like I said, I was just like, all right, I'm ready to see this movie, good or bad. And I saw it, and I did not like 31 at all. Like, for me, that was I had the kind of same feeling, like I just want to not be watching this film. Like that film was like a 2 out of 10 for me. I did not like it at all. So because I actually was getting some enjoyment, actors that I liked a whole lot were in you know what I mean? Like, so I was just like, hey, this is an improvement. So I was kind of a little bit higher on it. And I just want to see what he's going to do based on the ending of Devil's Rejects. Like, I was wondering, like, I had to know, like, oh, is he going to kill one of them? All of them? Like, what's going to happen?
I guess my last bit of pieces, I know they went to hate in the movie, but I feel like it almost would have been better, just given the limited amount they have and to kill him off screen. I think it would have been better to just have him had died during the end of Devil's Rejects and not even had him in that movie at all.
Again, I don't know for sure, but it all felt like a kind of a family reunion. And I felt like if he was there and he was able to do something, he wanted him to be somewhat
Well, he
part
probably
of
would have felt, left out if they had made it, didn't have him have any part of it.
Well, yeah, all I'm saying, but just the flow of the movie, it doesn't really
It's
make
also, the thing is, they could have...
He's got one shot to have him in the film again. They want to make a sequel, they make a sequel, he can't be in it.
They should have made the
You know what I
movie...
mean? Like, it's like, it's almost like saying goodbye to that character in that role.
I mean...
And I think it was a right choice.
And the reason they didn't make this movie years earlier is because it does just really feel like Rob Zombie was like, let's just go back to the well. Let's go back to the thing.
And one thing I did not like is that they did not take advantage of it being set like an 88 or something.
Yeah, there was no discernible difference.
And I don't care. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that could have been another slant of them being out of place in culture, or there was no exploration. It could have been,
like I said, that's where
it could have taken place 6 months later and seemed like the exact same movie.
Yes, there was very little to indicate.
It's just like they wanted to do 10 years later because they had aged, but they actually look pretty good. Like,
you can't really tell.
They look way better than, like, say, Wet Hot. You know?
Yeah.
Of course, that was like 20 years. So, all right, I think we wrap it up. Right, we got one more.
Yep. So the next episode, I don't know. We have like the bonus episode that's coming out sometime, but. Yeah, so the Halloween release is going to be Hauntedween, which is a movie made out of Kentucky that's low-budget movie from the early 90s.
Shot in 89, released in 91, slasher film. Maybe the first of its kind of that specific concept of a horror film. Did you look up to see if it was?
I tried finding, there's probably something, but it's the first thing I can remember seeing in terms of that specific story they went with. So so check that out. It's kind of a rare movie. We'll discuss it more on the next episode, but...
It's pretty rare.
Yeah, so if you're listening to the podcast, leaving us a review would be a huge help. You can also find everything we're doing at hbtvs.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts. We have a new short film out this month, Evil Ahead, that you can check out. It's under 2 minutes, so it's not a ton of your time. All that stuff's the website. You can find links to all the social media. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at TheWilliamCaps.
You can find me at Caster.
I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House Movie Store Podcast. Thanks for listening.